Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time you are tuning in. Welcome to Homesteading and Gardening in the Suburbs. I'm Emma from Misfit Gardening, and today's episode is a little bit more free talking, I guess. And I'm kind of discussing a bit more about what it is that's going on in and around the homestead and some of the activities that I'm doing, but also some tips and tricks to help keep your garden growing through to fall. So let's dig in and get started. As the summer solstice has passed, the days are now definitely getting shorter, but the plants are really starting to pick up growth. I'm trying to get more seeds successionally sown. I'm sowing things outside and even inside to help get plants in the ground ready for fall. But I also think it's kind of important to sort of talk about some things that have been going well and some things that have not been going well in today's episode. So let's talk about some things that have not gone well. And the first one is the lawnmowers have broken again, and they're going to take a couple of weeks to fix. And when you've got a lot of weeds growing up in around your garden beds, that's taking away a lot of the nutrients and stuff that my veggies and things are going to be needing. So some plants have definitely been showing stress. They've been getting less light because the weeds are getting bigger and a bit of, well, not a bit out of control. They are out of control at this point. But there's some really wonderful things that I have noticed that have popped up in the land since we haven't mowed. We have wild Rudbeckia or black eye Susans that have come up. We've got milkweed all over the place. And I took a walk around the garden the other morning as I was sowing some seeds. I was sowing some Swiss chard and stuff. And just, it smelled so wonderful. I could smell the scent of the milkweed, and it just smelled like honey. It was beautiful. And then I could hear all the bees starting to come in because it was warming up. And then later on in the day, there was all these beautiful butterflies that were showing up on the milkweed too. So by not mowing, I have been able to sort of help the local pollinators, which was really, really lovely. So it wasn't all doom and gloom. And that was kind of one of the things that, I did want to sort of point out in today's episode is, there are downs, but there's also some really great ups, and choosing to, look at those things that have gone well and having that moment of gratitude for, this happened, but I wouldn't have been able to see all of these beautiful butterflies if I had cut things down. I wouldn't have been able to smell all this wonderful milkweed if we'd mown everything. I never knew how wonderfully scented milkweed was until that moment. So I did just want to kind of throw that out there as well. So let's talk about some other things that have not quite gone to plan on the homestead. I have spotted some weird and wonderful beetles. I found out they are Japanese beetles, so that is something that I definitely need to start looking at methods of controlling. We've gotten some dog fencing put in, so now their dogs can go from the back door and into the run safely, whereas before it was kind of open, so you're kind of having, I was having to herd the border collies rather than the border collies herding everything else, but I was having to kind of make sure that the dogs were going into the pen, because we've had a few instances of where the dog, one dog in particular, I'm looking at you, Sparky, didn't want to go in the pen, but wanted to go trotting off around the rest of the property. And given that we have some various critters in and around the homestead that we do not want the dogs tangling with, that's not necessarily a good idea. So having this kind of run put in, for them to get to the pen, where all their toys are, they can go potty, all of that stuff a lot more safely. That's definitely giving me peace of mind. And it's also great for, when I've got the contractors over, at the house and stuff, and they're tearing down the barn and doing some clear up hopefully this week, and having that there means that I don't need to worry about the dogs are going to go over where they're moving all of this heavy and dangerous equipment and stuff like that. which means that it's a lot quicker than having to take each dog out individually on a leash. So that is definitely a bonus for me, right? It's time saving. The time that it took to put in the run and the fencing has definitely paid for itself in dividends from having that time back. Also, some great things that have happened have been I have been able to crochet some gifts for the holidays, and I've been working on various blankets for kids going into foster care, because I'm really, it's important to me to be able to support, things locally within my community. So I've been working on doing that. I've also found my fermenting stuff, so I can get back into making sauerkraut and kimchi and other deliciousness that is fermented. We found our home brewing kits the other day, like the equipment and stuff, so even better. And certainly as the weather starts to get cooler, that is definitely when we start to want to get brewing beer and things again. So that was really exciting to find those. But the best thing this week actually has been the dogs playing in a ball pit. Our new puppy Magellan, yes, he's named after the space probe that went to Venus, he dives into that ball pit head first with such an expression of utter happiness and excitement. It's really hard not to laugh and smile when he does it. So it doesn't really matter what's been going on, whether it's been not so good or terrible and very stressful and stuff. Just watching that dog diving into the ball pit, just for that moment, everything's all good. Let's talk about some other things that have been going well. The established herb garden, growing really well. I've been harvesting mint, lemon balm, lavender, savory, thyme, oregano. I think I found a curry plant in there, and I've definitely found some rue. There's also some lovage that I found growing, and what I think might be sweet Sicily. I thought it might be chervil, but I think it's sweet Sicily. So definitely got a lot of things coming out of there, and I've actually enjoyed a number of homegrown herbal teas over the last week, which is really great, because herbal teas, like organic herbal teas, are really expensive for 10 tea bags, and I can just harvest it right out of the garden whilst the puppies are taking a potty break. The puppies are not in the same space as the herb garden, but some of the herbs have grown so tall that it's really easy for me to reach over the 4-foot fence and be able to pick some stuff and then take it inside and make it into a tea. So that's been really, really good. The compost pile is really building, and it is getting ready for a turn. I have been shredding lots and lots of junk mail, so I've got plenty of carbon rich materials to get added to that, and the plan is for the composters, if we can get enough of it made between now and winter, then we're going to be spreading it before winter. And of course, one of the tips to get your compost matured quicker is to turn it every week. Is going to help introduce that water and air, and you want to be able to make sure things are moist all the way through, but the air is really important to help those microbes start breaking things down, and that's what's going to start your compost getting warmer, which will then help convert everything a lot faster. Now, speaking of winter, let's talk about the garden and some fall preparation, because we're at that time of year. And certainly back in Utah, I was harvesting lettuces and beans and greens, and, seeing tomatoes starting to ripen and getting the first peppers around this time. I wasn't necessarily worried about getting plants in for fall until August, but here it's very different. I've got, a lot shorter season, so really after getting everything in ready for the summer, I'm then getting things in again for fall. So I found that having plants starting for fall outside, directly sown outside, like broccoli, mustards, cabbage, kale and Swiss chard, has not worked for me. And actually my turnips and beets have just been ravaged by stuff. But more importantly, it's really been fluctuating weather that has meant that fewer seeds have come up, because it's been kind of hot and dry, and I don't have irrigation down at the garden. The irrigation is me lugging a 5-gallon jerry can full of water, across 3 acres, basically, is what I'm having to do. So that means that they don't get watered as often as they should, which is why I started going down this land race, kind of project early on, because I knew that there wasn't going to be any irrigation down in the garden. And if we hook up, the water, because we've only got one well, we're going to be, getting 400 foot plus of hosing to basically run things down the garden. And then you've got all that additional overwork on the pump and stuff to take into consideration, and I don't really want to deal with that right now. I've got other more pressing things that need to be dealt with on the house and the homestead. So until I get those things done, irrigation is when the rain comes and when I am able to lug that water down there and give things a water. So because of that, there's definitely been fewer seeds that have come up, and the ones that have come up, unfortunately, between the deer, the voles, the groundhogs and the porcupine, there's been a few critters that have been eating my garden this year. So in actual fact, I talked to a couple of local farms, because I head up the local farmers market, just to kind of see what was going on there. And I was able to squeeze in and get on their CSA program to help cover, basically what I've lost to the critters from the garden. So that was really good. And actually, that's a really great tip for you. If you're not getting as many things coming out of the garden, then see about, what's locally available at a farmer's market and stuff. Because, sometimes things work out to be cheaper, especially if you're buying things in bulk directly from the farmer, but you're also supporting local community. You're supporting the growth of other people in your area and stuff, which is always a good thing. But also getting to know your local farmers and stuff as well, you can start to kind of build that relationship and foster that bond of, how do you grow some of these things? Like, what grows well for you? And start having some of those conversations. So I was able to get in and join a CSA, and a CSA is community supported agriculture, and there's different kind of models that are set up for community supported agriculture depending on where you live. The most common is that you buy a share, and it's usually at a set price, and you usually buy them before the season starts. And what you do is, by giving the farmer the money up front, they're able to get the seeds and things that they need, or other stuff that's needed on the farm, right? They're going to be able to pay for labor to help harvest things, right? You're giving them the money ahead of time so they can put things in place. It also means, from the farmer's perspective, that they're going to be able to know, okay, I have 15 CSA shares this year, and that means that I'm going to need this amount of seed, I'm going to need this amount of labor to help harvest things, I'm going to need the soil amendments to be able to grow this kind of stuff, right? It helps with that side of things as well. And usually what happens is, when you get your CSA share, you'll then be given information about when you can expect to pick up a box, where you can get them. Some farmers deliver them locally, others there's certain places where you can go and pick them up. It might be in a parking lot somewhere. I've seen that before. Other times you can pick them up on the farm. Sometimes it's at a farmer's market where you can go pick up your CSA shares there. But each week there will be either a surprise box of whatever's in season. And for some CSAs, the farmers will post ahead of time, before you purchase that share, these are the plants that I'm planning on growing, these are the varieties, and this is what you can expect in a box, right? Others have more of a farm store kind of credit kind of thing, where you pay them a share of X amount of dollars, and then throughout the growing season, you basically buy from that credit that you've built up, right? You've kind of got like a store credit, right? So let's say it's $100, and then you choose off the list, like, this is the things that are going, this is what's in season right now, this is what's available, choose off this list, and you work through that balance. So I don't know, let's say that you've got like a pint of peas and it's $7, and a head of lettuce is $3, right? That's $10 right there for that week. So that would come out of that $100 that you'd already paid to the farmer. So your balance the next week would be $90, right? And work it down that way. There's different models for each farmer. Each farmer does it a little bit differently, but there's also different variety and things that are available. So I definitely would recommend checking out a CSA and seeing if there's anything available to you. Even if it's too late for you now and you're not able to squeeze in with a local CSA, knowing what's there and sort of talking to the farmers by going to the farmers market, you can still pick up produce at the farmers market. And what I certainly found from talking with various farmers is they usually grow a lot more than what they have CSA shareholders for, because they can then sell things at the farmers market as well, making an additional income that way. So either going to the farmers market or getting a CSA, you're helping support your local farmer. And where would we be without our local farmers, right? Like, it's the farmers that are providing the food that we eat. So it's always good to get things that are local too, because you often are saving costs, right, associated with shipping and things like that, getting it from the grocery store, right? Things are coming from Mexico, or they're coming from California, or they're coming where a climate is a lot milder and they're able to grow year round, right, versus people that have much shorter growing seasons. So that's definitely a good tip that I've learned, is to edge your bets and see about, getting food locally as well. Some of the other things that I wanted to touch on that have been growing well for me in the garden, really surprisingly, has been the amaranth. I was super surprised about how well that's been growing, and I've never grown amaranth before. I'm growing it alongside sweet corn, and the corn's doing very well too, as are some of the winter breeding leeks. Not all of them are growing well, but some of them are. Potatoes are looking very good, although we've started to see some signs of blight on some varieties, but on the whole, doing very well. The deer have eaten some of the potatoes, so if you're reading something that says that potatoes are deer resistant, let me tell you, they are not. And the tomatoes are doing very, very well. And for those of you that are part of the Facebook group, you'll probably have seen that I posted a bunch of pictures about how that tomato landrace project is going, because there's been some significant differences in how all of these 50 varieties of tomatoes that I've been growing. And of course, this is the first year in this landrace development project. So if you're interested in growing a landrace and seeing kind of how that pans out over the next few years, then the Facebook group is where I'm posting a lot of stuff about that. However, if you think it's something that you would like to see more on the blog and kind of read about it there, then let me know. That'd be great. I wouldn't mind posting about it there as well. So lots of things have been actually growing very well. I mean, yes, weeds have been taking over. Yes, critters have eaten a lot of stuff. I've had, a few handfuls of mustards. Mustards have been, the greens that have coming out of the garden. I've not had any peas this year because the deer ate those as well. But, there's been a lot that has done very, very well. And I was actually getting excited about harvesting garlic. And I went to check on it after finding where it was growing, like in amongst the weeds, and I found that the garlic had been eaten, which was a total surprise for me. I have never had anything eat garlic out the garden before, ever. And I've grown garlic for, oh my gosh, I don't even know how many years, 10 plus years, I think. And never had anything eat it out the garden until I moved to Maine. Bravo, Maine, bravo. You have a whole different level of critters out here. But usually around August is when you are going to start to see things like seed garlic coming available to buy, because you plant it in fall. So definitely keep an eye out, if you've got, signed up for email notifications from like your favorite seed suppliers and stuff like that. Keep an eye on those and look for when their garlic is going to be available for pre-order, and make sure that you get it while you can. I love growing my own garlic. It has been one of the best things that I ever learned to do in the garden, and having fresh garlic like out of the ground, and still being able to harvest and eat the garlic like throughout winter that you've grown has just been really, really awesome. So I'm really sad that I'm not going to be having it this year, unless of course it happens to be in the CSA that I'm getting. But garlic's great, and it's one of those things that you just plant out before the frosts and things get here. You plant the whole cloves and it just sits in the ground over winter, and then come spring everything grows, and it's relatively straightforward to grow most of the time. I'm going to be putting it into my new no-dig beds to grow for next year. So that's going to be really, really cool to see how that is going to work out. I'm also right now sowing beets. I'm sowing carrots. I'm sowing Swiss chard, turnips, lettuce, spinach. I don't know if I mentioned spinach already. Bush beans again for snap and green beans. I'm sowing peas to try and get a crop in for fall. Collards, mustards, Asian greens like bok choy, pak choy, tatsoi, mitsuna, like all of those things I absolutely love, and they thrive in those cooler temperatures. Green onions, also known as spring onions or scallions, those are good to grow this time of year as well. I'm also going to be trying fava beans or broad beans again, and zucchini, in the hopes that I can get a harvest of those before fall. I really have until the end of this month, and this is being recorded in July, beginning of July, I think, beginning of July when this is going out. And I don't have a lot of time to get things in before it's too late, because you need to have enough time for these plants to be able to establish and grow before that first frost in fall comes. Obviously, if you live somewhere where it is hotter and you have a much milder winter, then you can wait a bit longer. You can be looking towards end of August or even end of September in some cases before your fall garden needs to be going in. So it's not a lot of time. And of course, summer is when there's so many other things going on that you want to be doing, like maybe you want to be out hiking or swimming or camping or fishing and stuff, right? All those fun activities, making memories and things throughout the summer. So there's a lot of things that are going on, certainly because of the critter problem and my newfound pest problem. I am going to be looking to use some floating row covers to protect these fall plants that are going into the garden, and hope that it's going to deter the critters from them as well as the pests. And I'm probably going to be confining my fall garden to one separate bed and see how that's going to grow. So that's kind of my plan for fall, is just seeing how that's going to roll. And I think it's important for me to kind of share what some of these things going on have been, because I always say that the first year gardening is the hardest, and it is because you're trying to, figure out what your seasons are, how things typically move around the property, what some of the pests are, when do they come, what some of the diseases are, when do they come, right? And figuring all of this out, along with, getting your plants out and what varieties are doing better. So the first year is always going to be the hardest, but don't be deterred by it, because you're not alone when things don't work out in the garden. And I don't know a gardener who ever says like, oh, everything was perfect this year, like everything grew really well. Like there's always something that never quite grows very well, or maybe there was a pest that happened, or nothing ever seems to be perfect all of the time in a garden. So you're not alone, especially if you're a beginner gardener. You're not alone if things are not growing doing well. And I don't believe that, you know, like people say like, oh, I don't have a green thumb. Like everybody can grow. It just takes practice, and it takes a little patience too. This fall, of course, we've got a slightly more urgent task of putting in the deer fencing, and that is so that next year's garden will have fewer visits from the deer, so we can actually start to build on some of the successes that we've had in the garden and be able to actually start getting more produce from the garden. So that's why fencing has become slightly more urgent on the scale of things to do around the homestead. We're also going to be looking to acquire more wood chips and mulch to convert the garden beds to no-till, and getting cover crops in the ground to help hold the nutrients in the soil, because after the lawnmowers have broken and stuff, I have seen how fast the weeds can take over. And the only beds that have not had weeds coming up left, right and centre and taking them back over into the pasture again have been the no-dig beds. So I'm going to be moving everything to that no-dig, no-till kind of methodology, and I think that's what's going to work very well for this garden in the future. And also what I've found is, after growing out almost everything in my seed stash, I have found that a lot of my seeds have lost viability from moving from Utah. Seeds got hot during the move. We were moving for about 3 weeks. Like it took a week for us to drive over, but then we were kind of in temporary accommodation kind of situations until, you know, the purchasing of the house and everything came through. And because of that, seeds got hot. They were in a window, like things just didn't, you know, there was no convenient place to protect them from temperature fluctuations and stuff anywhere. So because of that, they've lost the viability from getting too hot, right? Seeds like things to be cool, they like things to be dry, and unfortunately, you know, when you lose the viability in the seed, it means that, you know, not as many things come up. So aside from, you know, the critters and things getting in, it being like quite a dry season, very challenging for things to come up. On top of that, there's a low viability issue with some of the seeds. So my husband came up with a great idea. Since we're moving to a landraised homestead, he suggested putting the seeds together in glass jars to store in the basement. Now, I don't mean like mixing all of the seeds together, so you got melons mixed in with lettuce and then everything's all together and we're just going to throw that out there and see what grows. No, not at all. But kind of putting certain seeds together, so like determinate tomato varieties go in one jar, or maybe it's all the paste tomatoes in one jar, or the butternut squash varieties are in, you know, another jar, and then the, I don't know, Halloween pumpkin squashes are in another jar, right? Green zucchinis in one jar, yellow zucchinis in another jar. Maybe it's all the yellow slicing tomatoes go in a jar, and, you know, yellow cherry tomatoes are in another jar and blue cherry tomatoes are in another one, right? Maybe it's snap peas in one jar, shelling peas in another. You get the idea, right? And I might actually do that. I'm kind of tempted, and here's why. Because it doesn't matter what the variety is for our homestead. What matters is that it thrives in the climate and on the land, and it's delicious. We like the taste of it. It will, you know, it will be eaten, right? If it tastes good, it will be eaten. And if it makes it that far growing out on the farm, right, you know, when we're able to harvest something that tastes good, great. If it doesn't grow, that's okay, right? If it was yummy, we'll save the seed, right? So it doesn't really matter what the variety is particularly, because, you know, we're going to be saving those seeds from things that taste great, and we're expecting to see, you know, things are going to change and look a little different as we're making those selections, right? We're making those choices as we're saving seed, right? But there's a few reasons that we might, or that I don't want to mix the seeds, right? And some of those are really, you know, wanting to preserve those varieties, right? They may be of historical or cultural significance, and we want to keep those, you know, separate. They might be super rare varieties that few people have. And if we move to, not preserving those and saving seed from them and, having things, cross, we're not going to be able to get those seeds back, right? You kind of losing things in the diversity. So on one hand, the diversity is really great because you're able to, ensure that you've got things that are thriving and growing on the land. But on the other side, there is, a sacrifice being made, and that is losing, some of those varieties. So that's kind of interesting. And I have actually seen heirloom seed producers asking their customers for seeds back on certain varieties. There was one that was this year, and I think the seed that they had was lost due to unforeseen circumstances. I can't remember if it was a flood or a fire damaging their seeds or something, but they basically put a plea out on their social media asking for this particular variety, and if any customers had any seed left, could they send some of it back to them so they can then grow out and preserve that seed. So that I was kind of hesitant to abandon all of the varieties and mix everything, and the other hesitation doing it is because when I grow up I kind of want to grow and save seeds, although I'm growing and saving seeds right now anyway in the landrace homestead that we're doing, but I actually would like to grow heirlooms and support preservation of those varieties. And I know that's quite a shock for many of you to hear that, but it's true. One of those drivers for us getting acreage was because I wanted to be able to do that. Now right now, with working full time and us getting the lay of the land and how the seasons operate, yada yada yada, right, that's not going to be something I can really pursue for a few years. But it is something that I would like to do. Now, granted, for the most part, because I'm wanting a landrace homestead, I'm not trying to, save particular varieties of seed, right? I mean, there's not a lot of isolation that's going on in terms of protecting different varieties from cross-pollinating. So I'm really kind of curious to hear from you. Would you go all in on a landrace homestead and mix the seeds, or would you keep them separate? And I will let you know later in the season what I decided to do. Until next time, I hope your garden grows beautifully. I would love to see pictures of how your gardens are growing over in the Facebook group. So I will see you there if you are in the Facebook group. And if not, I hope your garden grows beautifully, and I'll see you all next week.